Hi everyone, Saranuva here and I'm back again with another video. This time, 10 things to stockpile, hoard and save for Shadowlands. Now, if Blizzard ever decide to announce the exact release date, Shadowlands is going to be released this year and there are things you can do to safeguard your gold making efforts and get off to a solid start. As with all expansions, it's best to look at it in a way of supply and demand. You know, what's in the game at the moment that's in abundance but might not be when the new expansion drops. I get that this is a very open-ended question, so I'm going to try and give you some ideas of what I'll be looking at stocking up ahead of Shadowlands. I'm not expecting you to all go like 10 IQ moves and start stockpiling like 10,000 rolls of toilet paper like we did in the pandemic. I'm talking about solid 10,000 IQ moves that can pay off really big if done right. If you have watched my previous videos on what stockpile and hoard before an expansion starts, particularly patches as well, you'll know that these are educated guesses and gut feels, so I'd spread yourself out a little bit on this. I'm going to recommend 10 different things, but I wouldn't focus particularly on one market just in case that market actually crashes. I'd actually spread yourself across a variety of different markets so that you're not going to lose all of your gold. I mean, Christ, I sound like a stocks and shares investment company.
Disclaimer, your capital is at risk. Your investment may go up as well as down.
Seriously though, these tips are pretty much nailed on to come good in the future, apart from one massive gut feel tip that I have. So if you want to remember where these tips actually come from, and come back and thank us in a couple of months if it works out for you, why don't you follow us on Twitter? It's literally twitter.com/Saranuva. But more importantly, if you could subscribe to the channel using the button below and hit the little notification bell, just so that you don't miss out on any upcoming content as well, because I will be rolling out loads when it comes to Shadowlands. So here are the tips that I hope make you a ton of gold in Shadowlands with as little effort as possible right now. The two things I would invest in stockpiling all revolve around materials and mounts. Stocking up on materials is a great idea. There's often an abundance of mats available at the end of an expansion. It's mainly because players are bored. There's nothing left to do in the game. They're doing farming as a way to pass the time. Plus, there's also multi-boxes out there, cashing in and flooding markets with lots of materials, crashing items down into lower than average costs. Use this to your advantage and, figure out who the multi-boxes are on your server, speak to them, ask them to be your supplier. I've got a couple of suppliers on my server at the moment and you'd be surprised how many items they can actually farm with a multi-box. They ultimately want to get instant gold and they don't want to have to wait for items to sell on the auction house, so it's a win-win for both parties involved, so I would really look into that one. There's also going to be a massive crossover with regards to materials, so it often dictates the price for items. So with this in mind, I'm going to suggest that you aim for a bit of both. Crossover the materials, crossover the items that are produced by materials, as well as a few other exciting little bits and pieces I'm going to go over. But ultimately you want to try and make it rain with gold when the Shadowlands expansion comes out. The first one is Ghost Iron Ore, and the mounts that are available through Ghost Iron Ore. It's found in Pandaria, and I have made a video on this in the past, which has a full mining route available. But you actually want to get out there and farm the item. Check out that video because it's got the best mining routes in there, and you will literally be using your own time to generate the cash, which is the best way of making gold. The reason that I've mentioned Ghost Iron Ore, though, it is primarily used to craft 6 of the main craftable mounts in the game at the moment. The majority of the ore is used in the dual crafting panthers. You've got the Jade Panther, the Ruby Panther, Sapphire Panther and the Sunstone Panther, which can be used on their own. But you can also combine to create the Jeweled Onyx Panther. These all require a jewel crafter to prospect the ores for the gems that are required, and it will take a lot of Ghost Iron Ore, so I'd recommend picking it up cheap on the auction house. However, the one main reason that I would recommend focusing on Ghost Iron Ore is the Sky Golem. This is a herbalist's best friend, unless you're actually a druid. But the reason that you want to focus on it is because of the changes to professions in Shadowlands. There may be several users who are changing to herbalism, as it may become a little bit more lucrative than ever before. This is one of the main reasons why I'm recommending Ghost Iron Ore. Now, there are two ways of going about this. You can either stock up on the Ghost Iron Ore and try to sell it at the beginning of Shadowlands, or if you have alts, you can start now, particularly if they've got engineering and alchemy. You can start creating the materials for Sky Golem, as you know, it takes about 30 days to create each mount due to the daily cooldown on Jord's peculiar energy source. You also need the Ghost Iron Ore for Trillium Bars for Living Steel, which is transmutable on a daily cooldown, and that's where the Alchemist comes into it. If you already use your Alchemist for other cooldowns such as Pyrium Bars, you should keep an eye out on cheap motes or Spirits of Harmony, so you know you can take advantage of the Riddle of Steel transmute. This basically gets rid of the cooldown for a higher cost in mats, but it's even better if you alt a Transmute Master for those extra procs. If you're like me, I've got two, but I've got 4 Alchemists on the same server, so you know you can just transmute to your heart's content on each of those cooldowns to maximise that one. The herbs in Battle for Azeroth, like I say, are being crashed at the moment because of the multi-boxers. So as part of Inscription, it's key in terms of creating the Ultramarine Inks, which is part of the reputation contract for the factions in BFA such as the Rajani, Uldum, Rustbolt, Resistance, etc. I'm going to be open and honest and say that this one's a particular gut feel of mine. Mainly because of the current level of materials that are available on the auction house. It's probably going to be a nice short-term flip for this. The reason that these are going to be lucrative in Shadowlands is they've all got mounts that are locked behind the reputation gates. So the price of the contracts may become very lucrative in future as people try to go back to the old content for mounts. And there is a talk, obviously, for the requirements for reputation being sounded out at the moment for Shadowlands. So this might change. For the time being, there is a small chance that contracts will still continue to sell in Shadowlands. There's also going to be a small selection of BFA glyphs that were introduced, such as Glyph of the Dolphin, mainly because it's quite scarce at the moment because it requires a world quest in order for it to drop, and it's very similar to the world quests in Legions in terms of you've got to wait to make sure that that's actually popping that day, and chance the fact that it's actually going to drop. If the price of Ultramarine is too high at the moment, just pick up a handful of the cheapest BFA herbs and mill them yourself, if you've got an alt with Inscription, and either sit on the inks or create the contract ahead of time, and once Shadowlands comes out in the first couple of weeks to months, you might actually start seeing some of the sales from this one. As I mentioned before, you may have an alchemist who is transmuting Pyrium bars instead of creating the living steel bars. So, unless you're like me where you've got a couple of alts that have multiple transmute masters, it's going to be a choice that you'll have to make to whether you focus on the Pyriums or whether you focus on the living steels. But the Pyrium bars are actually used as a transmute that goes into True Gold, which is for the Vial of the Sands mount. It has consistently sold extremely well since its release in Cataclysm, and there's no reason why this won't continue. There are a lot of mats that are required though for the Vial of the Sands, and these still exist in the Cataclysm regions. You're talking Azhara's Veil, Whiptail, Cinderbloom. These are all needed for the items such as Flask of the Winds, Flask of the Titanic Strength, that all go into the Vial of the Sands. Now, I did create a how-to video on how to gather Azhara's Veil, as well as the portal to actually unlock the Vashia area. This helps you farm them faster and better than ever before, so you might have to rely on doing that to generate some gold in Shadowlands, but ahead of the time I would recommend either stockpiling the mats or hoarding a few of them of the mounts actually in a guild bank, just ahead of the expansion. Plus, anyone who gets interested in creating the mount might actually just need a Sky Golem to help them farm the herbs faster as well. So, it's a bit of a win-win all round. Now, the next couple of items I'd recommend stockpiling on are world mounts. Group farming is quite abundant at the moment for a variety of these mounts, and they drop throughout the world of Battle for Azeroth at the moment. If you can, I would recommend picking up several of these quite cheap if you can hold on to them. They won't set the world alight when Shadowlands launches, but they're perfect for those long-term investments. Give it a few months and these will be more than likely going to increase in purchase price. Definite long-term plays here, but I'd recommend keeping an eye out for the following. The Reigns of a Tame Blood Feaster, it's a drop that comes from Nazmir, and it lets you summon the Leap and Vein Seeker mount. The price of this mount has been shorted massively due to the farming groups, whether that is pre-made groups or whether that's just multi-boxers. But it's fair to say that whilst this won't be a hot seller at the start of that expansion, like I say, the price of this mount should massively increase because of the scarcity that'll happen as the expansion of Shadowlands goes on. Current price is around about 51k, so it's a very easy investment if you've got some liquid gold sitting around on the EU realms at the moment. But like the Reigns of the Tame Blood Feaster, another one to keep an eye out is the Captured Dune Scavenger. Currently got an EU region price of around about 1.5 million, so definitely get them cheap if you can. I would recommend sitting on them because these will become rarer as the expansions go on. Golden Mane's Reigns is the one that everyone seems to want. The price for Golden Mane's Reigns has been consistent across EU. It's about 240,000 gold at the moment. It's a sizable investment, and it's definitely going to be one that the collectors will want deep into Shadowlands. Especially people who don't actually have enough horses as mounts. I still don't know why it sells, but it's definitely going to be selling in Shadowlands. And then the final one for me is token amounts that just don't appeal to me. The Tudon Reigns of the Terrified Pack Mule. On my server at the moment, it goes for around about 2 million, which is absurd. So I won't be investing in that one, definitely. But the EU average is around about 300,000. So, if you see cheaper than that, I would definitely snap it up. The collectors will definitely be after this in Shadowlands. So if you can, pick them up and sit on them and then sell them deep into the expansion of Shadowlands, you'll make a killing on that. So the theme here is, farm groups and multi-boxers. And again, another mount that is actually farmed is the Nadjatar Blood Serpent. Now, this is slightly different in the fact that it requires 20 abyssal fragments and drops from mobs in Nazmir. They currently have about an average price of about 20,000. So the great source of cash, and they'll only increase in price with scarcity because people won't be farming them. I'd recommend picking these up quite cheaply if you can, or even farming them at yourself. Downside is it can take several hours to actually achieve these enough for the mount, but if you've got a few alts that you're boosting through Nadjatar, by all means, you might land on a couple of lucky drops there. But that is definitely one that'll sell, particularly because you've got the next one, which is the Reigns of the Thunder and Ruby Cloud Serpent. This one again requires you to farm 10 Sky Shards in the Veil of Eternal Blossoms in Pandaria. Now, this one's been a consistent seller, particularly because of the change that happened where you could actually sell it on the auction house. Beforehand, you'd have to sell the kill. Now you can just basically farm it, go to Alani the Stormborn, once you've formed the Sky Crystal, and then basically you can get the Thunder and Ruby Cloud Serpent mount from that and sell it on the auction house. The downside with this one is you can't actually buy the Sky Shards on the auction house, so you're going to have to do the farming yourself. But there'll still be groups in there looking for a group right now that if you're a little bit bored before Shadowlands, you can just create a group and just farm these. Particularly if you've got a few hours to spare, you might as well try. One little tip I will give you though is check your alts for random Sky Shards in the band in your bags. They are bound at account at the moment. So if you're like me, you might have actually leveled a few alts in Mr. Pandaria, and you might hit lucky and find a couple just sat in an alts bank bag. I had 2 alts that had 2 of the shards, so that was a great stepping stone for me to get started on that. And then for me, the final investment is pretty common sense. Raw gold. Invest and hoard the raw gold as much as you can. How else are you going to dominate a market early if you don't have the capital to invest in materials? You've got to remember, everyone's been on this mad race to get 5 million gold together to get the long boys, so there might actually be a few players who used to be a challenge on your server who aren't very liquid at the moment, particularly at the start of the expansion. So if you can, keep as much gold stockpiled as possible, and if you're in the particular start of expansion professions that always do really well, enchanting, inscription, alchemy, you can't go wrong. Just sit on the gold for as long as you can, and then just invest massively in the market and flip them. Keep an eye out in those big markets if you can. So that's my 10 tips of what to stockpile ahead of Shadowlands. Hopefully this is going to make you a ton of gold, or at least put you in a great position to dominate a market when it first opens up. As per usual, if you did like the video, please don't forget to like and subscribe below. Also follow me on Twitter to hear more inane gold making tips. One thing I'm really interested in is if you've got any comments or feedback, please leave them down below. I read every single one of the comments, whether it's a negative and a positive. I'm always trying to learn when I'm doing these videos. So please, any comments you've got, just leave them in the comment section below. But for the time being, take care for now, and I will see you in the next video. Thanks. Bye.